Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Evoke Therapy Programs broadcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Wednesday, July 5th, 2023. It is good to be back from a work trip and last week where we had some technical difficulties. Thanks for your patience. So, tonight, what I've been asked to talk about is short term programs and how they relate to wilderness therapy. So, I'm going to do my best to kind of present what we're starting to hear with this new trend in short-term programs in the country. I think there's a really great movement of people trying to create programs for adolescents and families that are in that 30-day range that can be accessible through insurance. Obviously, one of the great barriers and difficulties we have in our field is the limitations that insurance companies places on the treatment process. The difficulty, of course, is that when insurance starts to dictate the terms and the conditions of treatments, then that can become compromising. That can become not the ideal treatment plan. So I'm going to do my best to talk about it. But as always, within the context of talking about a very specific question, a very specific topic like tonight's about short-term programs and wilderness therapy, I'm going to talk about parenting or psychological principles that are applicable to all of us in all of our lives. So I'll start off with this first thought, this first idea, which is that what is the selling point for 30-day programs? And again, I'll talk about the clinical implications. First of all, the 30-day programs, of course, are wonderful options and are very attractive to families because it's short term, it's limited. The idea that a child's development, mental health, addiction can be resolved or in large measure tackled during a 30-day program is attractive to anybody, especially parents who are suffering with alongside their child, and also the financial strain that can come to families. And what is promised is that insurance will cover it. And on the outset, that is often true. And my admissions team asked me to talk about this because they get some of these parents after a 30-day program has begun and the insurance is runs out midway through the program. See, insurance companies look for that level of functioning that makes it non-emergent, non-acute care, non-primary care. It doesn't get justified. So if a child is doing well enough, if they're upbeat, that gives a window or a door for the insurance company to pull out. And because the rates of these programs are so high, oftentimes the parents are left with the choice of pulling their child from a program that's only partially completed or paying an exorbitant daily rate after the insurance company withdraws their support. So that's, of course, anybody can understand that idea. I did a broadcast a couple of years ago with a man named Joe, episode 264. So if you're interested in more details about wilderness therapy, about what it takes to get insurance coverage, episode 264, Insurance and Wilderness Therapy, is a great resource. And what I can say further this evening is there are 4 companies that we've worked with that we refer families to that we've had some success in filling the requirements asked of by insurance companies to be able to get reimbursement. And those are the following companies that we work with are Fix My Claim. You can go to fixmyclaim.com, bridgewaybilling.net, Access Billing, accessirg.com, or there's also another program that works primarily with autism or those on the autistic spectrum. But because our understanding of autism and the spectrum is getting better, because we see now that it truly is a continuum, we have had some more folks find success by going through the mhautism.org company and getting some reimbursements. They'll do their best to pre-qualify you, and they'll also do the best to make sure that what we're providing you is exactly what the insurance company needs. So that's a place that I would encourage you to go towards. Another, of course, appeal for these short-term programs is the emotional resources that are spent, the time away from home. Because it's shorter, it's appealing to both the parents and the children. And I want to talk about a parenting principle in here. I talked about this in the first part of the journey of the heroic parent in reference to adventure programs. which about 5 or 6 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, became more prolific in our field, where young people are doing river rafting, mountain biking, rappelling, and all kinds of activities, getting in a van, going from place to place and participating in adventure activities, which of course can be very therapeutic, can be very exhilarating. But what I wrote was this idea that until we understand what the great appeal is for parents and address that feature, primarily the primary hook for parents in choosing a program sometimes is that my child is going to like it or possibly not be angry at me at creating or instigating an intervention that they don't want a part of. And so the sell, the hook, is that the child's not going to be upset, the child's not going to be angry. And what I said was, at this point in time, and it's still true today, we are not primarily an adventure program. Of course, they play games and they do things out there, but we are a nature-based, outdoor, nomadic model for young people. And the games and the stuff that happens is in the context of moving from place to place. We're not putting them in vans and we're not doing high adventure activities. So at this point, and at the writing of my book, that is not Evoke's approach. And I wrote, until we address the dynamics in the family that make such programs so appealing, we're really not going to make the kind of progress that we want to or that we need to make in these families. I had somebody tell me recently, an adult, tell me recently that if I worked with her family, if I could work with her parents, and this is a woman who's graduated from college, who's working in her career, and by all measures is successful in the world. Her draw to therapy is to further deeper her awareness and her understanding and her relationships issues. And she said to me in an appeal and a hope, if somebody were able to work with their parents, somebody was able to kind of just get her parents on the path of working toward themselves, that would be a tremendous relief off of her shoulders. She wouldn't feel during their interactions, family gatherings, she wouldn't feel that great pressure or that great pull that she so often feels when she's around her parents. And again, this is somebody in their late 20s, in their career, graduated from high school, not suffering with any acute disorders or with substance abuse disorder, who's saying that just to make a difference in her parents' lives, in their approach and their thoughts and their ideas, would be a huge relief for her. I hear parents ask all the time, if my child is a young adult and won't be coming back home, why spend so much energy and time on working with parenting issues, on addressing parenting issues? Or even I have parents ask me, is it too late? My child doesn't live at home. And what I can tell you is, when people get into this work, the work of unlearning what we've learned in our childhood, of discovering who we are, what we need, what we're up against, what is the dilemma that we're grappling with in our lives. When people get into this work, one of the things that they often are hungry for is their tribe, their people that are on the same or a similar journey. I hear it all the time from people of all ages, people my age. So the one thing I would tell parents is, as you do your work, and as it relates to this idea that shorter is better, and you address whatever pulls that that idea, that carrot, if you will, that individuals hold in front of you. If you can address the energies and the issues inside of you that makes that so appealing, in terms of not making the child angry, not upsetting the child, not getting the child to a place where they might not forgive you. If you can address those issues, you create a whole different community for your child. You create somebody that they can go to and talk to, that they can vent to, that they can be around, that they don't need to be fixed. Somebody who understands, probably most pointedly, and I'm going to say this as plainly as I can, and it might sound weird or crazy to those that are new to this broadcast, but when the parents can understand and come to terms with the fact that they've dented their child, that they've hurt their child in small, medium, and large ways throughout the child's life, that the parents are still grappling with unhealed trauma of their own, anxieties um, twisted thinking, like distorted thinking, those kinds of things. When the parent is able to make friends, to learn to love their horrible, rotten self, and that is a fundamental goal in psychotherapy, as I see it, to create enough safety for the client that they're able to see what I write about in the journey of the heroic parent, to see our own idiocy, our own fallibility, our own imperfections, our own issues. The more that we can come to terms with that, and be on friendly terms with ourselves, with what I call our horrible, rotten self, the better it is for everybody. And I might say it to you this plainly, and I can get away with it in this format, right? Because I'm talking into a microphone. I'm not talking with one specific person that I'm looking at. If you can realize what your issues are, it's a big burden off of your child's shoulders. And fundamentally, I will say it this simply: you're worse off than you think. That's the peeling of the onion. And the thing that makes it different than you might imagine is as that onion gets peeled, as you come to terms with how flawed, how imperfect, how fallible, how human you are. As you do that, ironically, paradoxically, you become a little bit healthier. In other words, you don't now need the defenses to protect the ego. You don't need to be good, in other words. So while I'm talking about 30-day programs and the draw it is that we can fix this thing in a short period of time, that it's insurance based, that everybody's going to come away happier, you really are bypassing a crucial developmental stage as a parent, which is you have to come to terms with your own soul. One of my favorite quotes as of late is the quote by Carl Jung that says that a person will do almost anything to avoid facing their own soul. So I think this particular model appeals to many people because of those issues. I read this quote last night, shared it on my Instagram, and thought it was perfectly applicable to what we're talking about right now. Somebody wrote this: we don't wake up one day magically healed. It is a process, a journey of evolution, of growth, stripping away layer after layer of who we have been, who we are, and who we are becoming. And once on that journey, it never seems to end. That's why I see on the right side of my screen when I look over, I see so many names that have been at this for so long. Not because, again, they're in acute crisis, but because they're coming back over and over again to reacquaint themselves with the work, to keep on the path. It's not a burden. It interestingly, that peeling of the layers is not driven by guilt and shame. Guilt and shame, not just shame. Guilt and shame are part of the defense, the fuel for the defense. We don't want to feel guilty. We don't want to feel ashamed. Of course, those are miserable experiences for anybody to feel. And because the work is so deep and so fundamental and takes so much time, in essence, it takes the rest of your life. The shame and the guilt that we feel prevents us from seeing the deeper layers, from seeing how flawed, how human we are. I've been thinking about Pinocchio lately, and I was trying to look back and understand what was the transformation, what was the heroic moment for Pinocchio that transformed him from being a puppet, being a wooden boy, to a real boy. And in researching this, what I discovered was he just had to tell the truth about himself. That the lying was a metaphor for presenting a persona, a facade, an image, an idea, an ideal to the world. And that when we become really honest with ourselves and just tell the truth, and I'm not talking about if you stole a cookie from the cookie jar. That's not the kind of truth. Although that is, in a sense, the kind of truth that's displayed in Pinocchio. It is a metaphor for the transformation from being a false self to being a real self, to accepting who we are. And like I've been saying the last couple of months to you folks, the great paradox of this work is that it's only when I accept myself that I can truly, fundamentally transform and change. And that there will be so many therapists and so many coaches who will be anxious to tell you you're a good mom, you're a good dad, you're a good parent, to try to assuage your guilt. And again, they mean well by trying to remove the crippling guilt and shame that you feel. But there is another way, mom and dad. There is another way. There's a way to do battle, to have some success with guilt and shame, typically through psychotherapy. At least that's my view. That's my way. Al-Anon can be helpful. That's why I recommend that every single broadcast. Codependence Anonymous, Families Anonymous, CODA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, all of those can be great, great resources to help also. But when we have success with guilt and shame, when we deconstruct our guilt and shame, when we realize where it came from, that it was meant to control us, it was never meant to guide us toward authenticity. When we deconstruct the shame and the guilt and let go of it little bit by little bit over a long period of time, we'll be more honest about who we are. That's what it means to become, in the story of Pinocchio, a real boy or a real person. We give up the facade. And the temptations that Pinocchio went through were, again, just attempts, if you will, like Carl Jung said, to avoid dealing with the soul, to dealing with who we are, bypassing the developmental task. One of the things that an experiential milieu like wilderness therapy does, that these 30-day programs struggle to do more, is they bypass resistance, because the primary engine in wilderness therapy is not talk therapy. It is something that happens, not just when the therapist visits, but every day there's some kind of psychotherapeutic group or discussion. That's a part of it. And one particular model, that's an anchor, if you will, something that grounds it. But it is the experience. And when you walk through the front door with a teen or a child, or an adult for that matter, with you and me, if we're being honest with ourselves, if somebody walks through the front door and just confronts the defense, just tells it like it is, if you will, as if that's some great talent and some great insight, the most likely response is resistance. So experiential therapy goes beyond that. It's every day out there that that kids are able to quote psychological models, 12-step slogans, and mantras, fill out the workbooks, even write a quote unquote good letter home to mom and dad. But we see in real time, in the milieu, with the natural living circumstances, with the small group living, we see the issues that were at home. We see the child. The child becomes, if you will, exposed. And that's why wilderness therapy and wilderness therapists and staff have to be very delicate, because it's a very vulnerable time. Sitting in a rainstorm, a lightning storm, sitting with bugs, sitting in the cold, having to sit by a fire to keep yourself warm, working with the limitations of living outside. I've experienced them as a therapist. I've experienced them as a father in the wilderness. And those things are challenging. Those things reveal who we are. So often what I say to children who, for example, may quote some of the slogans in the 12-step program around letting go or around surrender, what I will say to them very gently at times is, I don't see it. I hear you talking about it. I hear you saying that you want to go home and prove to your parents that you can respond to their boundaries with respect, but I don't see it. And it's all the in-between moments that reveal the child. So experiential therapy has a way of accessing trauma, but also healing it. Natural observations are better than formal observations in some way. We value both, of course. That's why we do talk therapy. That's why we have workbooks and readings and assignments. But having them together, the natural observations, which means watching a child. I remember sitting down with a child, completely scattered, coming away from the group in conflict with the group, struggling with directives from the staff members, sitting down in front of me, frustrated, exacerbated. Exhausted, struggling at a lot of levels, and wanting to go right to the workbook or the letter writing, and having me just slow them down and saying, let's talk about everything I just saw with the group, with the staff, with your exasperation, with your frustration. We'll get to the workbook in a minute, but let's talk about that. And as you know, mom and dad, because you're at this point, if you have a teenager, they don't want to talk about their problems. They don't want to talk about their issues. It's too frightening. They don't expect it to go well. So you have to have skilled therapists or training or communication skills training to do it, but you see it, right? It's tangible. It's grist for the mill right in front of you. The differentiation and the distance that gets created between parents and children is critical. For everybody to get a clearer picture of themselves, it is incredibly valuable to have the separation that wilderness naturally creates. Back when I started as a wilderness therapy, it was even a little bit better, although it was inconvenient. As I've said many times over the years, back in the early days, parents would send a letter on a Tuesday, for example, and the child would have to send back a letter by Wednesday before they got the letter that was sent the day before. So letters would miss each other. And while that's frustrating, it's not an efficient communication process. What I learned by watching that is you take away the reactivity. You take away the ping pong, the the back and forth, the pinball machine kind of back and forth, and you start getting to what do you want to say. If you could communicate your truth without worrying about or thinking about how it might be received, right? I'm getting at the essence of letting go, of telling the truth, of not being in control, of surrender. If you could communicate your core truth without concern for how somebody would react, what would you say? And so in those early days with the way that we used to do it before we uploaded everything to the computer, and if we're a half an hour late from the typical time, we get parents calling us asking for the letters. Understandably, that's how we all adjust to technology. But those old days where the letters were going through snail mail largely, or through fax machines that sometimes people had to get at home or at the local mailboxes store, you saw a deeper self-reflection. You do love your child more than we do. Nobody was going to win the competition with how much you love your child. But that doesn't always mean that you're most clear. And that distance that gets created by wilderness therapy helps to facilitate, encourage, foster differentiation, which is the balance between connection and separateness. In general, even the insurance companies know longer is better than shorter when it comes to treatment, resistance, and recidivism. The one variable that we're trying to address in wilderness therapy, with wilderness therapy's experiential nature and intensity, is we're trying to get as much as we can in as short of a period of time as possible. We see, I've said this, when I started in wilderness therapy 27 years ago, when I started in wilderness therapy, I saw right away that I've never seen anything this impactful, this dynamic, this rich. And even when children move from wellness therapy to long-term settings, therapeutic boarding schools, the pace of things slows down. One of the reasons why people are attracted to short-term programs is because It's comfortable. I tell the story that I was once giving a presentation alongside a colleague of mine who I really care about and respect, and he was describing at their residential treatment center for adults, actually, not even for young adults, but for adults, that he made sure that they had 10 choices of pillows for the clients. Because he said when he was in treatment for substance abuse disorder, when he was younger, that he spent the first, I don't know what the number was, several days or weeks complaining about the pillows. And so he made sure that that wasn't going to be a barrier. And what I jokingly said to him after I stood up to speak after him, we spoke back to back at an event. I said, we actually don't give our clients pillows. They make them by stuffing their clothes into a stuff sack each night. And then we talk about their complaints in the context of their clinical work. Then we have grist, because people don't want to, when children are sent, for example, to evoke for substance use disorder, they don't want to talk honestly about their substance use, about what they're medicating, about that idea that I love to think about when I think about substance use disorder, that addiction, that chronic use of drugs and alcohol is an attempt to not be present in your own life. And adolescents, young adults for that matter, don't want to talk about that or be that honest with themselves about that, because then they'd have to do something about it. So we talk about other things. But when we're talking about other things, we're talking about the things still. So everything becomes grist for the mill. Wilderness therapy is a time to reconnect with nature, which is reconnecting to yourself, right? Because we are nature. As Andy Goldsworthy says, he has a great quote that says, when people talk about being disconnected from nature, they're talking about being disconnected from themselves, because we are nature. And I think it's universally understood today that nature is a great way to ground oneself, a great way to reset one's brain chemistry, to pull away from screens, from the fast-paced life, that the new luxury is being unplugged and out of cell service. And that's getting more and more rare, more and more sacred in our world. And fundamentally, the work of wilderness therapy, the decision, and those that are on the screen, most of you have made it, most of the live audience have made it, and some of you have made it a long time ago. The task itself asks you to become a self. It asks you to address your anxiety. It asks you to address your own self-esteem, your own guilt, your own shame. It invites you into your work. The letter writing and the slow pace of communication that's inherent in wilderness therapy slows everything down for the therapist and for the family, so that you can go through your process, your relationship dynamics, your communication at a much slower, manageable pace. I talked about the book by Michael Easter not too long ago called The Comfort Crisis. I did an episode, episode 518. A lot of parents are worried, like I said, about the lack of creature comforts in wilderness. The fact of the matter is children are already uncomfortable at home. If they weren't uncomfortable, they wouldn't be demonstrating or displaying the symptoms and the escape mechanisms, the self-medicating symptoms that we're seeing. And there's something incredibly empowering about living outside and overcoming the elements, learning to be present in discomfort. There's something metaphorical. I have said this, that although I believe that wilderness therapy should always have therapists, skilled licensed therapists working with the kids, so much of what happens that teaches and facilitates change in the child comes from the experience of being outside in wilderness therapy in a small group. From the Comfort Crisis book, where he talks about our culture's addiction toward comfort and the value that comes in getting outside of our comfort zone, I just pulled one of hundreds of quotes I could have taken from his book. by Michael Easter, The Comfort Crisis. He said, but a radical new body of evidence shows that people are at their best, physically harder, mentally tougher, and spiritually sounder after experiencing the same discomforts our early ancestors were exposed to every day. Scientists are finding that certain discomforts protect us from physical and psychological problems like obesity, heart disease, cancers, diabetes, depression, and anxiety, and even more fundamental issues like a feeling of a lack of meaning and purpose. Even the idea of cold plunging, which we don't do, but even the idea of cold plunging is blowing up in this country and in the world. Getting yourself in a frigid ice bath and learning to breathe, to be present, to not panic, to not escape, to kind of fight the sympathetic urge in our nervous system to jump out. People are now seeing the benefits of that throughout the day. So this idea, what we've done in this country, a great book on this is called Nurture Shock. It talks about this is called Nurture Shock by Merriman and Bronson and Merriman. I believe I'm getting that right. They talk about this idea that we've replaced recreation for work in this country. It's attractive to the child. It's attractive to the parents because it reduces conflict. But it doesn't quite teach the lessons that work does. And I've said this before. I wrote this in my first book. You walk through the gates of Disneyland in Anaheim, California, near where I grew up, and the sign you see written right there is, "This is the happiest place on earth." It says the happiest place on earth. And what every parent knows who's gone to Disneyland and brought their young children is that it is not the happiest place on earth. The very thing that you think is going to create joy often becomes part of a dynamic where the child is unhappy, complaining about the lines, about the food, the sugar intake causes all kinds of wrecks all kinds of havoc with the child. And I'm not preaching against Disneyland. I have been and will go again. But sometimes our thinking about comfort versus discomfort is skewed. Most parents want greater resilience for their children. And some of that is meeting challenges, overcoming things that scare us. The larger milieus in small programs, oftentimes in these programs, it's TV for recreation, right? Watching a movie is something that they earn. They're in large groups, sitting in large groups. What groups of 7, 8, 9 do for us is it helps to create a manageable dynamic. We're able to observe more. It's a much more psychologically and physically contained system. We're limiting the amount of variables, limiting the amount of exposure to the culture. It's really a pristine. It's really an absolutely pristine setting, clinically speaking. So my take homes for this is that this program and any program you decide to choose, and I support you. If I went to treatment when I was a teenager and the only treatment that my family could afford was one that was paid for fully by our insurance company. And if a parent came to me and said, that's the only option I have, I would say it's better than nothing. But no matter what kind of intervention that you've decided on or you've done or you're working towards, it's really an intervention that jumpstarts the rest of your life. And it takes time to get the hang of these things. 30 days, often we're getting kids after the 30-day program, sometimes after all the money is spent, sometimes in the middle of a 30-day program when the child is getting kicked out for one reason or another. And what I know about our own program, our length of stay has increased over the years, not because we make more money, but because we know that it works better. Longer is better. It takes time. So many people say to me, When they're listening to these webinars, these podcasts, reading my books, they say, I didn't get it at first, and now I get it. I know that there's some people I'm looking at over on this screen who have said that to me. It takes time to get the hang of things, to start to hear it, to have it start to make sense. You come back to listen to another topic that I speak on, something else that I say. You read a book by James Hollis or Harriet Lerner or J.D. Gill, and you're trying not to get specific answers to your specific challenges for today, but to learn to think in a new way. That's really what this is. It's learning to think in a new way, which is not easy, which comes with fear and guilt. Remember, as I've been saying lately, getting healthier will feel wrong to us, to all of us. It's foreign, it's uncomfortable, and in many ways, we have been taught certain things, certain ways of being that are convenient for control and for managing behavior, but that don't feed the soul. So it takes a long time. It's a start. Even with Evoke Wilderness Therapy Program, even with our Wilderness Therapy Program, it's really important that you understand that no matter what you do afterwards, it is a start. And this is lifelong work. The promises of more time, the promises for less time and money are attractive but not realistic in the overall treatment plan. There's this idea they talk about in Nurture Shock. Bronson and Merriman talk about this, any port in the storm parenting. I do it all. We're all guilty of it. We've all bribed our kids to be quiet or to placate them. We've all done that in one way or another. Maybe it's with screens or with a sugary treat or with the promise of something later. Right? That's something every parent has grappled with. But we also know the long-term costs of it, the balloon payment that will eventually come due. My son said when he went to wilderness therapy when he was 13 and 14, he's now 30. He says to this day that the one thing that he got out of it that was the biggest lesson was the easy, hard, hard, easy lesson that we talk about. That if you do the easy thing now, it's going to be harder later. If you do the hard thing now, it's going to be easy later. And wilderness therapy and outdoor camping, outdoor natural living teaches that inherently. Just like living on a farm teaches you the law of the harvest. What you reap is what you sow naturally, inherently. That's the idea. The small groups in the natural living and hiking become the microcosm for life, for relationships. We don't need a lot of background from you to know what your child is like. All we need is 1 week. We get it from you because it's good to have both, but we don't need it. The child exposes themselves and who they are rather quickly. It's not uncommon at all for me to give an update or for a therapist to give an update at that first week mark or 5 days in to a parent, and for the parent to repeat over and over again, that's them. That's exactly what we are dealing with at home. It becomes a microcosm. Everything is grist for the mill. The time is for the child, but it's also for you, mom and dad. It's not that your shift will fix the child. That's not what I'm saying. That's not our philosophy where we'll tune you up to be a more effective manipulator, engine to change the child. That's not what we teach. We teach you about having a different relationship with yourself, which then leads to a different relationship with your child, which leads to a different relationship and perspective about their symptoms or their issues, their mental illness or their addiction. And those kinds of changes and transformation change you, change the way you react. This is why therapy is more than coaching and suggestions and giving you templates, giving you a script. It's not that. That doesn't work. Like my favorite author, James Hollis, said, the instruction for the morning is outdated by the afternoon. And what was relevant today, tomorrow will become nothing because you'll be presented with new challenges, new conversations, new reactions from your child. And what I love in working with folks at Evoke is when people come back to me and said, we hadn't talked about this, but I had this interaction with my child, and I was able to think about it differently. I was able to problem solve on my own. That's the goal of the parents' work here. It's not to give you a list of scripts and directives that if you follow, A to B, B to C, C to D, and so forth, if you paint by numbers, you'll come up with this masterpiece. But to help you to heal, to help you improve your awareness, to help you see your stuff and what gets in the way of effective parenting and effective relationships, and to give you enough love and support in the discovery of all those things that you don't feel ashamed or you don't want to hide. You don't feel judged by us, but you feel welcomed and invited to continue to work on that stuff because that's all we have. This is all we have. This is not a program that fixes you in 60 days or 90 days. It is not. Yes, there can be some incredibly healing experiences, some wonderful realizations and epiphanies. But the reason that folks attend this broadcast years after the child leaves is because it's ongoing work, like that quote that I showed you earlier. This is as much time to work on yourself as it is on your child. And I know from my own experience, it is a lifelong timeline. And fundamentally, to work out your own esteem and ego needs, to understand what's going on with you and your ego that need to be good so that you can separate yourself and your need from the child's needs. Children know this inherently. They know that some of the reasons we're parenting are to assuage our anxiety, not to take care of them. I was just talking to somebody today who was worried about sending their child to Evoke because they were worried that the child wouldn't forgive them. And the very setup to that question, we find out the work that the parent needs to work on. Yes, we listen to our children's feelings. I spend my life listening to people's feelings, listening to children of all ages and their feelings. And the parent is supposed to be the adult. The parent is supposed to take care of themselves. Resting our need to be good on the shoulders of our children is a crushing weight. We have to do the work. We can't avoid the work of our soul in this process. And that's another reason why short-term programs and their promises are unreal. I love the idea. And I said this to students in the field all the time. If I could shorten this process, if I could cut this process down, if I could do this to you right now, if I could promise all of you that we could do what we do in 30 days and that most of it would be paid by insurance, I would do it. It would actually be an incredible business model and moneymaker because I would get all of the clients in this area who have the needs that this program addresses. Right? In other words, if I could give you the cure, I would never have to work a day in my life again. But I can't. And people who appeal to that desperate want and need aren't doing any of us any good. Excuse me. Happy to address any questions that have come in. It looks like none have come in. Why don't I go to the upcoming slides, and then if any questions come in, I'll get to them. My two books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are available on Amazon and Audible. If you want to do a deep dive into your own work. In fact, you know what I'm going to do from now on? I think I'm going to list on the visual slide here a list of 5 or 6 of our competitors and their websites, just to highlight the idea that I believe in this. I believe that finding you is probably the best thing you can do for your child's well-being. If you want to do a deep dive in your own work, build that foundation that I was discussing. Excuse me. I have a tickle in my throat. If you want to do a deep dive, finding you is the best use of time and resources that I can imagine. We have an online version also. Our next options are August 16th through 20th. I'm actually running that one. It's going to be full in a day or two. So if you want to come, August 16th through 20th is the one that I'm running. We also have one July 14th through 16th online. We're going to be doing a sequel program, Returning to You, October 25th through 29th. I also am running that one. And then we will have another one in the UK coming up. Sorry about my cough. We have custom finding connection for couples and parents, or custom finding families. Just contact intensives@evoketherapy.com for more information. We have support groups each week. The next offering is tomorrow night, July 6th at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Contact Sarah D at evoketherapy.com or go to evoketherapy.com/family involvement for more information. We have one meeting per month that is just for alumni parents. July 25th is that offering, 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. And then we have a once a month intensives alumni meeting, July 11th at 6 p.m. is that offering. We have a family trek offering. We've been doing this for decades. We haven't really talked about it that much, but we have a family trek available. It could be from 3 days, 3 to 4 days, a week, where you come out with your child and you essentially participate in wilderness therapy with them. For those who want to go deeper, contact admissions@evoketherapy.com for more information. If you want to coach online somebody that's been taught in the Evokes attachment-based model, the kind of stuff that I work on, we have parents, coaches we have coaches for families, parents, coaches, or individuals. Any issue that's going on in your life, intimacy, boundaries, stage of life, parenting a struggling child, of course, having a child come home, any of those options, you can do it virtually. We ask all current parents to attend at least 6 12-step support groups, any combination of Al-Anon, CODA.org, FamiliesAnonymous.org, or AdultChildren.org. Also, RefugeRecovery.org or NAMI.org are great resources for free classes and information in your local communities. All of these broadcasts are available on your podcast app. Just go to Spotify or your favorite podcast app and search Finding You an Evoke Therapy Podcast. Like us, subscribe there. You'll get notification when a new episode drops. You can also go to soundcloud.com on your computer and listen there, or you can go to Evoke's YouTube channel and watch the rebroadcasts videos there. You can find Evoke Therapy programs and me, Dr. Brad Reedy, on Twitter and Instagram using the handle @EvokeTherapy and @Dr. Brad Reedy. You can also find the Evoke Intensives program on Instagram using the handle @EvokeTherapy Intensives. On Facebook, you can find us by searching Evoke Therapy programs or Evoke Therapy Intensives. And of course, the Evoke Therapy blog has wonderful content. If you'd like to give back for people that can't afford treatment, the 3 charitable partners that we work with are ChooseMentalHealth.org, Sky'sTheLimitFund.org, or the EvokeFamilyFoundation.org. You can earmark your donations for a specific population if something is near and dear to your heart, or even for a specific program. My next broadcast will be July 11th at 6:30 p.m. I'll be talking about transitioning from wilderness, transitioning in general, and stepping down in levels of level of care, and the challenges that families, that parents have, and what to look for, what to work on. All right, did any questions come in? Somebody says of the intensive program that it was transformative and highly recommended. Thank you very much. So thank you for sharing that. All right, folks, any questions you want to send in, any requests, you can always send them in between episodes at webinar@evoketherapy.com. I hope, although this was a little bit different of a broadcast talking about specific approaches of programs and really giving you a commercial for wilderness therapy, I hope that we're something applicable. I hope it makes a difference in supporting you in your progress in your work. And on behalf of the people that love you and the people that you love, thank you for showing up and being willing to do your work. It makes a big difference. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.